Welcome into Sportsmemo's betting podcast for August 26th. It's week 1, college football, and this is the Every Game on the Board podcast. We're breaking down every single game for week 1, college football, Division I, FBS, whatever you want to call it, all the Thursday night, all the Friday night, all Saturday, the whole week 1 card on this podcast. First segment up, Thursday night games. We got Robbie Veno up first. Robbie, welcome into the podcast. How you doing today?
I am doing great today, Drew. Excited for college football. How about yourself?
Oh, man, I'm really excited. Really excited to find some winners as well. Hopefully we can do it on the podcast starting. First game up, 7 p.m. Eastern, kickoff on ESPN. 133, 134, the rotation numbers of this one. We're working down the card, guys. If you got your odds screen up, sportsmemo.com. Free odds page is recommended as well. UCLA at Cincinnati. Looks like 59 to 60 being the total. -2, -2.5. That's the Cincinnati Bearcats laying at home to the UCLA Bruins. Robbie, how you looking to bet it?
Yeah, it's interesting, Drew, because it's non-conference, but it's the same exact opening game matchup as these two teams had last year. Chip Kelly's first year, and at home they get upset straight up by Cincinnati since he goes in as a 14-point underdog, walks out with a 26-17 win. UCLA outgained Cincinnati by 2 yards in that game, 306-304, but never really got anything going offensively. We know that throughout the season for UCLA, it was a bit of a struggle on offense, especially at the quarterback position, trying to learn Chip Kelly's offense. But there might be a little bit, it's on the road, obviously, and I'd rather have revenge or a revenge-type motive at home. But certainly UCLA remembers that. 14-point dogs getting beat straight up. Now they go to Cincinnati. I wish that we could bet these two teams in separate games this week because I'd like to be on both of them. Cincinnati, obviously, under Luke Fickell. You and I have talked about this a lot, but he's done a tremendous job recruiting. He's turned this team during his 4-year tenure here. This will be his 4th year. But he's turned it into what I consider to be one of the AAC elite teams at this point in time. You can throw them right up there with Central Florida and with probably Memphis, teams that are going to compete for that conference title each and every year. They only get better this year. Obviously, it's the second year for them with Desmond Ridder at quarterback. I think he surprised a lot of people with his ability as a dual threat guy last year. And on the other side of the coin, I've heard nothing and read nothing but rave reviews for Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the highly touted freshman who, like I say, struggled a bit last year but comes in really confident this year. So you've got two teams here, Drew, that, like I say, to me, have an arrow pointing up. We've seen some movement in this game. I think you pointed to it. Total-wise, it's gone down. This game at one point, correct me if I'm wrong, without going right to the odds screen, I think this thing got as high as 66 and then tumbled straight down to the point where it's gone through the opener and down 3 points from an opener of 62 to 59, 59.5 in some spots. Actually, you get an array of numbers across offshores. So I think offensively, both of these teams are going to be much improved. I think defensively, UCLA will be a bit improved. The question for UCLA, and the reason why I haven't rushed there yet, although the betting market has, chopping this from 4 down to 2.5. The reason I haven't rushed there yet is I have to be able to rely on the UCLA passing game. I know Joshua Kelly's great as a running back, but they have to be able to throw against this Cincinnati defense. Don't know that I've convinced myself yet that UCLA can do so, and I do believe that Cincinnati can do both. Excellent running game, and I like their passing game to be improved this year. So right now it's a tough call. Like I said, would have liked to bet them both. Probably won't have action on this contest as far as side is concerned because I like them both a lot. But maybe a total play is still in the works here.
Robbie, we got Georgia Tech at Clemson up next, 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific kickoff here. Looks like 59.5 or 60 being the total. Clemson laying 36 now at home in Death Valley. And I'll tell you, Robbie, when I first saw this line, minus 33.5, I jumped on Clemson. This was way more than a month ago. And the reason being, Georgia Tech in the future might be fine. I believe that the new head coach is Jeff Collins, but he's changing everything. They're going from a triple option team to now going to be throwing it around a little bit more. You've recruited towards the triple option. And Georgia Tech in the Paul Johnson administration, I actually feel like he was a little bit underrated as a coach, and they had a good thing going there, but they're switching it up, and it just doesn't bode well for year one, the first year after running the triple option and changing it, and therefore, and it's the worst combination you could imagine, going against the defending national champions, arguably the most talented team in the country, with a quarterback that's already proven, he's likely to be a top level, next level quarterback here. So I think the Yellow Jackets are really up against it. I think Clemson's the side here. I know it's, not the in trend, the quote unquote, wide market strategy to be the sharp angle to lay 35 points. However, if I'm ever going to do it in college football, I like to do it early on in the season, week 1, week 2, lay the wood here. I think Clemson rolls here. And outside of, let's just say, heavy winds or rain, weather affecting this game, I really think Clemson rolls them here. How do you view Georgia Tech Clemson, man?
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more, Drew. I mean, and you're right. When you lay this type of price, no matter who you are, the square label immediately comes, to mind here. Square play, laying big points with a powerhouse team against a team going through a severe transition like Georgia Tech is. But, I find that sharp and square stuff to be probably the most overrated thing in sports handicapping. It's probably it's better for speak than it is actually to application. So I don't mind with Clemson here. I think Georgia Tech, no new news. We're not breaking new news here with Georgia Tech under Collins going from the option to more of a spread type system, a power spread, kind of the Florida Urban Meyer type thing. That's where Jeff Collins originally came from. Before he got to Temple, made the passing game work there as well. But their defense is going to be under siege here because the defense is undergoing a change too. And when you face Clemson, the ability to run and throw the ball, and with that offensive line, just very, very difficult, I think, for Georgia Tech here to stop Clemson from scoring points. How quickly does Dabo come off the gas pedal? Mid-third quarter, mid-fourth quarter, I don't know. But this is the third defensive system that Georgia Tech will be in the last 3 years. These kids weren't recruited for the offensive system, not necessarily recruited for the defensive system. I know Collins had his first recruiting class this year. It takes a couple years to get that going. The only benefit that Georgia Tech gets here, Drew, out of all of this is the fact that Clemson graduated their entire starting defensive line, and maybe in week 1 there might be an opportunity to keep your quarterback upright a little better because you're not facing Dexter Lawrence, Cleveland Ferrell and company, and maybe you can open up a couple extra holes against the new defensive front in the first game of the season. But remember, these guys played so much last year, and they're just as highly touted. So I think maybe if I'm looking for a positive for Georgia Tech, the positive would be that they get this game in week 1. Their offense at least gets it in week 1. But, the switch is just – it is what it is. You can't go from having all-option recruits to a spread system and think that you're going to be successful against Clemson in week 1. So for me, it would probably have been lay the points as you did early on. And certainly not take them with Georgia Tech. The total here is interesting because if Clemson makes their way, which they can do in the blink of an eye, but if they make their way to 50 points, this game certainly gets over the total as well. So that thing has been bouncing back and forth a little bit at this number. We'll see where it settles in, but you could see Clemson getting their way to 49 points, 50 points, and maybe Georgia Tech sticking 13 on there against this Clemson defense.
Yeah, good point. with that breakdown, Robbie. And also keep in mind, like I was talking about with the weather, laying some of these big points and betting overs, the weather can affect that. And as we get into the week 1 breakdowns, granted, Robbie and I are talking right now on Monday, if you're listening later in the week. I believe there's a tropical depression out there, tropical storm Doreen, so keep that in mind. It might affect some of the southern games being played. But as we move down the line here, we got, Robbie, my favorite game, possibly in week 1, definitely on Thursday night. 2 teams that I have circled, 2 teams that I bet on and against some in the last couple years, 2 teams that I keep a really close eye on. Talking about FIU, the Panthers at Tulane, the Green Wave here. We got -1.5, -2. Tulane laying at home. Looks like 57 or 57.5 the total, Robbie. I'll throw it to you, man. Interesting handicap. I'm very interested in the game and watching it. I know you are as well. How you looking to bet FIU Tulane?
Yeah, I share your enthusiasm for this game, Drew. I mean, you can't have 2 more up-and-coming non-Power 5 teams than these 2 right here. There's many right now who believe that Butch Davis is not only the best coach inside Conference USA, or at least has done the best coaching job inside Conference USA, but one of the better coaching jobs across the country. Now in his 3rd season here, the stuff that he's done, I know a favorite of both of ours, the Indiana transfer, James Morgan, at quarterback here for another year, which can only help the offense. This team has a ground game that's already established. But what I like in reading the past month and a half or so, where FIU is concerned, Drew, is the fact that the receiving corps with 5 guys back all want to make a big statement this year. Butch Davis certainly runs a little bit of a pro-style offense, but still is not adverse to throwing the ball around if that's the advantage he's going to get. In this particular contest, the soft spot for Tulane is the defensive backfield, so we'll see if the veteran, experienced quarterback Morgan, with his wide receivers plus a ground game to lean on, can do some damage offensively. They probably can. Tulane, with an outstanding defensive front and maybe a little bit of a question mark across the front of FIU as far as the offensive line is concerned, but certainly nothing I don't think that they can't handle here. But that is Tulane's calling card this year. It'll be their defensive line. If we switch sides of the ball, here's the most fascinating part of the whole thing. Willie Fritz getting out of the triple option and just turning this offense over to Will Hall. There's opinion out there that this may be the fastest tempo offense inside the AAC this year, which is hard to believe because of the rate that UCF plays at. But that's the kind of pace that Tulane is going to go at under Will Hall here. Willie Fritz, I guess his logic was, Drew, that the triple option has got him as far as they're going to get. And in modern day football, you've got to mix in some of the tempo and some of the passing game. So, I mean, Will Hall's I don't know if I want to call him a guru, but he's one of the most respected offensive minds when it comes to this tempo offense. He's going to implement 3 parts of 3 NFL systems, or he has implemented the Falcons, the 49ers, and New England. So you know that those are 3 teams in the NFL that go up tempo. But his main goal was to get this thing to go as fast as they possibly can go. The players seem to like the system. Good quarterback here in Justin McMillan for this. Earlier in the spring, Will Hall had said, we're not a great offense yet, but when week 1 comes, we will be. And I think it's going to be interesting because FIU hasn't seen any of this on tape, and we'll see if the point comes down to, will Tulane execute it well right out of the chute? Offensive coordinator thinks they will. I really am interested in this game. I think both sides have good advantages against the other where their offenses are concerned. So we'll see how this one goes, but it should be very exciting. It'll be definitely different to see Willie Fritz out of that, move the chains, grind it out style offense and into this extreme tempo style.
Yeah, Robbie, this game is going to be a great one to watch. I mean, all the sports bettors, or not all, but, sports bettors out there. An interesting angle I'm going to go with is the loser of this game. Look to bet them the following week. I mean, I think both of these teams' upside is very high. One, I agree with you on the Butch Davis breakdown. I think he's one of the better head coaches in the country, as is Willie Fritz. Both of these head coaches, I don't think you can name too many of them, and I'm not just talking in G5, I'm talking in all of college football ahead of these two. Plus the fact FIU, they have 47 three-star recruits for a Conference USA team. And I believe that's all from Broward, Palm Beach, and Dade County down there in South Florida. So he has done a heck of a job in South Florida recruiting, and we can see why. Butch Davis, the old Miami head coach, and I know in 2001 Larry Coker was the head coach when Miami won the national championship, but those were all Butch Davis's guys. He's the one that really built that program up to, quote unquote, arguably the best college football team of all time. And sure enough, he's back in South Florida. He's recruiting hard. FIU, Robbie, is my pick to win Conference USA. Dark horse to go to a New Year's Six Bowl. I just think James Morgan's a perfect fit for a talented offense there. And Tulane on the other side, you brought up some good points on the offense. I think there's more question marks with Tulane than so FIU. But Tulane with the new offense, I really want to see it in action before betting it. And you touched on it. I mean, Tulane up front on the defense, just athlete-wise, top to bottom, probably one of the more underrated rosters in all of college football. When you start talking about highly recruited teams, the state of Louisiana doesn't always get thrown out there with, the Floridas, the Texas, the Georgias of the world where high school recruiting's going, but per capita, there aren't many states out there with more Division I recruits than Louisiana. And of course, in Louisiana, outside of LSU, Tulane's likely the second highest prominent program there. So they do have the recruiting prowess there. So top to bottom in terms of roster talent, I think Tulane's up there and very underrated. This is a tricky handicap, and one that I'm likely not going to be involved in, but I thought that you brought up a good point with the Tulane new offense, and it makes me look towards the over. Do you have any kind of last words here on this total and which way you would look to bet it?
Yeah, I would think that if you want to be proactive, you're playing over here. I think the price tag kind of suggests last year's Florida International and Tulane offenses. But like I say, when we turn the TVs on Thursday, it's not going to be the grinded out style. Tulane's got good skill position guys, Drew. I mean, the drawback, there are some matchups in this game that could cause you some concern. Like I say, the Tulane defensive front against the FIU offensive front, that's the weakness for FIU. So they have to contain these guys and not let them get to Morgan. Morgan, to me, is mobile enough to make plays outside the pocket and maybe avoid some of the pressure. And like I said earlier, the Tulane defensive backs against Morgan throwing the football in his wide receiving core trying to make a mark. These teams are really good, top to bottom, and I'd be with you. I think Tulane's got expectations of winning that Western Division, which includes Memphis and Houston. So that goes to show you the level that these two are at right now. And really quick, back to your point about Butch Davis. 2 years ago, everybody thought this conference was going to belong to Lane Kiffin after that year Florida Atlantic put together. And all of a sudden, 2 years later, we don't hear as much about Florida Atlantic as we do about FIU right now.
Yeah, and that's another thing about FIU and what Butch Davis has been able to put, because Lane Kiffin took all the headlines going down there, the whole Lane train and kind of his on-field and off-the-field antics, but really Butch Davis has outperformed him. And the two schools, FAU talking about in Boca Raton and FIU in Miami, are only about an hour apart, so they do recruit against the same guys and kind of going up against each other. So good point there, Robbie. We got Texas State at Texas A&M up next, but before we get there, do want to give out the podcast coupon code SMHALF. That's SM as in Sportsmemo, SMHALF, SMHALF, for half off Robbie Veno or myself, Drew Martin, 7-day all access. That's over $50 in savings there with that coupon code at sportsmemo.com. SM Half will also work for any full season package from Robbie Veno or myself, Drew Martin, on sportsmemo.com. And of course, that could be over $500 worth of savings with that coupon code. You can get NFL, college football full season. Just do college football full season package. No extra charges later, guys. That gets you all the way through the national championship game using SM half at checkout. Huge savings at sportsmemo.com. We're talking with Robbie Veno on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports. I'm on Twitter at Drew Martin Betts. Feel free to reach out to us. Any questions, anything you want to hear about on the podcast. Do appreciate all the guys that have done that in the past. Love reading about it. Love to know that people are listening to the podcast there. So reach out to us on Twitter at Drew Martin Betts or at Rob Veno Sports. Robbie, we got 3 games left here on the Thursday night slate, and talking about Texas State at Texas A&M up next. We already talked Clemson, and an interesting tidbit, something I don't put a lot into, is look ahead spots in week 1. Do want to preface that in week 1 because of course Clemson and Texas A&M are playing each other in week 2, but 2 reasons I wouldn't put too much emphasis into it is because week 1 guys are ready to play. They're not really looking towards week 2, and also both of these 2 teams playing on Thursday, whereas I believe their game in week 2 is on Saturday and likely a showcase game on one of the big networks there. But either way, we got Texas State at Texas A&M, this one in College Station. Texas A&M laying 33 or 33.5, depending on what sports book you want to go off of, and 56.5 seems to be the prevailing total in this one. So we got the Bobcats versus the Aggies, in-state rivalry, so to speak, but Texas A&M looks to roll. It's just a question of, do you think they'll roll by 33.5 or more, Robbie?
Yeah, and that 56.5 where the total is concerned, Drew, just really came down a couple of points within the last 60 minutes. It had been around 57.5, 58 for the most part, and took a tumble down. I mean, it actually, off of the opener, went straight up, so maybe that's just take back on this game. I don't know that I have to reiterate too much about my feelings where Texas A&M is concerned this year. You and I did the SEC preseason preview. As far as Western Division teams are concerned, Alabama likely wins that side of the SEC. However, if there's going to be anybody to stop them, LSU and Texas A&M are the first 2 that come to mind here. Jimbo Fisher in his second season did a tremendous job in his first and really made an outstanding quarterback out of Kellen Mond, which I didn't think, the year before he got there, watching Kellen Mond, I wouldn't have thought that was possible. But he had a monster game against Clemson last season, and the second year in his system, the second year of recruiting here, the stuff we read about and see going on at A&M makes me believe that they're going to be an SEC powerhouse type team this year. Texas State, on the other hand, has chosen to go a little bit different route with the coaching. They fire Everett Withers. They bring in Jake Spavital, who, has got a really good offensive mind. He's been with West Virginia under Dana Holgorsen. He was at California under Sonny Dykes. But he gave his offense, Drew, over to his offensive coordinator, Bob Stitt. And I don't think that a lot of people that casually follow college football know who Bob Stitt is. He was the Oklahoma State offensive analyst last year. But this is a guy with 30 years of coaching experience, and actually the guy who has taught a lot of air raid concepts to air raid coaches. Dana Holgorsen, in fact, credits Bob Stitt for teaching him the fly sweep and the jet sweep, a play that Holgorsen says he used to his advantage in a 70-24 bowl win a few years back, where the opponent, I can't remember who the opponent was, West Virginia was an underdog, but they just couldn't handle it. It might have been Clemson, I'm not sure. But Stitt is one of those minds, air raid, extreme tempo, multitude of screen packages and the jet sweep, like I said, type stuff, and then he'll attack downfield. Ran an offense while he was head coach at Montana that was one of the best in FCS football. Came from the Colorado School of Mines, which is where he really made his prowess known. And the fact that coaches across the country went to the Colorado School of Mines to learn his offense is absolutely amazing, but they did. So this is the kind of OC you're dealing with when Jake Spavital turns it over to him. It just goes to show you what he thinks he'll do with this offense. Everything I mentioned will probably be implemented in this package, whether or not Texas State can operate it right away. They had a really good quarterback battle here between a kid that followed Stitt from Montana and ended up here at Texas State. The kid's name is Grish Jensen, and the returning starter, Tyler Vitt, who had been at Texas State under Everett Withers. Vitt was just named the starter yesterday. So the fact that he beat the kid who knows the system out for the job says an awful lot. Well, with Stitt calling the shots here, I think they'll probably be able to, get over with some stuff on offense before people really see it on tape. And I think week one, Texas A&M, if they're up big and they let up in the fourth quarter, perhaps this team, Texas State, puts up some scores in the fourth quarter. But you can expect them to be one of those teams that's, very prolific, especially in Sun Belt play offensively. The trouble you have in a game like this is if they come out there and they have 3 and outs that take 45 seconds, Texas A&M is going to turn around and run the ball and throw the ball right down their throat, and they could be down monstrous right off the bat because they're running this explosive type extreme tempo offense. So the 33 and a half certainly could come into play here in favor of A&M. It also could come into play in the fact that Fisher may pull some starters for week number 2. I think the reason, I'm going to get back real quick to your original point about look-aheads, Drew. I think in the Clemson game, another reason why you wouldn't consider Clemson to be looking ahead to Texas A&M is the fact that they start with a conference game. And when you start with an ACC game, you got to win that first. That puts you in an ACC championship if you win your conference, and puts them in good position for the 14 playoffs. So I wouldn't think too much of a look ahead there. A&M could have somewhat of a look ahead for sure, looking ahead to redeem themselves against Clemson next week. So this game has a lot of interesting elements to it, and I wouldn't be surprised if Stitt and the Texas State offense do a little damage to A&M's defense.
Yeah, good breakdown, especially with the Texas State offense, and good point in terms of, Texas State. When I look for a profile of a team catching, 33 points, upwards of 5 touchdowns here, I do want the underdog to be able to score, like you talked about, and be able to throw the ball downfield, because if you're down 40 points, that back door might be open. It's part of the handicap. Some people look at that and go, oh, bad beat on Texas A&M. I always say that's not a bad beat. That's part of the handicap, right, man. You got to bring that into it. But at the same time, those teams that go up tempo, go fast, throw the ball downfield, especially when you're going against the big boys, like it's going to happen here with Texas State athletes going against Texas A&M athletes, you got to watch out, because you start going up tempo and you're not making first downs. Like you said, you're taking 35 seconds off the clock, Robbie, punting it back, and all of a sudden it's the middle of the second quarter and you're down 30 points. And now, you can almost burn your ticket up in that situation on the road. So it's a tricky handicap. It's one of the things you kind of got a seesaw of what's going to happen in this game looking ahead. And of course, I haven't been able to pull anything out on the Bobcats versus the Aggies. So right now, just be watching as a fan. But we do have 2 games left, both of them nightcaps here, 10 p.m. Eastern or later kicks, starting off with Kent State, the MAC team, at the Pac-12 team, Arizona State Sun Devils. Seeing Kent State catching 25 right now, Arizona State minus 25, total of 60.5, seeing 61 as well. And of course, Arizona State, can't talk about them without bringing up Herm Edwards. Talking about last year, Robbie, it seemed like the whole world was, the Herm Edwards, what kind of hire was this? What a terrible hire. And he kind of stuck it to everybody with that opinion. Arizona State performed well. And I'll tell you this, Robbie, a lot of people were like, oh, who wants to hire a 65-year-old or what? I don't even know how old he is, probably older than 65. And like I said from day one, Robbie, when you're an 18-year-old kid, you relate the same to a 40-year-old guy that you do to a 65-year-old guy, possibly even better with the 65-year-old guy. So I never bought into that, and he's a player's coach. I believe he's going to recruit well, go into these living rooms and have a relationship, a positive relationship with the parents of recruits. I think he's going to do very well at Arizona State going forward. However, this year, he's got a true freshman, I believe, named the starting quarterback. High school accolades you can put up against anybody. I think he is or is number 2 on the California all-time state high school passing record. I'm not really sure. But either way, Arizona State, new quarterback here, going against Kent State. And we know Kent State running a high-tempo offense again for a MAC team, and they only went 2-10 last year, so it's tough to kind of read how much improvement they are actually going to have, reading in between the lines. I think it's a fascinating game to watch, mainly from a total standpoint, but what is your overall view here of betting Kent State versus Arizona State?
Yeah, I think, when you said week 1 is like your favorite podcast, Drew, I think these are the reasons why week 1 is so great, because there's so much new to go through here, and there's so many changes that you have to kind of be able to read and project and see how they're going to go before the rest of the country catches on and the rest of the betting public catches on, and then you lose all types of value. It helps Arizona State's Herm Edwards too. It helps any 60-plus-year-old coach who's been out of coaching for as long as Herm Edwards was. The biggest help is, number 1, getting your leaders to buy in, and number 2, winning right off the bat. If Arizona State had gone 0-5 last year in their first 5 games, maybe the buy-in wouldn't have been as great, but Manny Wilkins, last year's quarterback, N'Keal Harry, last year's star receiver, those 2 guys were roommates and captains basically of this team. They bought in, and that team won, and now that creates a great atmosphere for year 2 here at Arizona State. With both of those guys gone, you mentioned the new quarterback situation, true freshman. Jaden Daniels is his name, and he is the number 1 high school passer in Southern California. He threw for 14,007 yards. How about 170 touchdowns in 53 games? And it's not often that you see dual threat guys, Drew. I mean, just the term dual threat, when you read it, automatically creates this assumption that the guy's a better runner than passer. Not true here. In the case of Jaden Daniels, 14,007 yards in 53 games. Like I say, 170 TDs. Capped that off with his running prowess, 3,645 rushing yards, 41 touchdowns. He carried the ball 562 times in high school. So this guy is a true dual threat. And even if you don't want to believe the numbers, believe the offensive coordinator, Rob Likens, who was quoted this week as saying, the kid's poise is absolutely through the roof. We're going to hit the ground running with him. There'll be no restrictions in play calling for a true freshman quarterback. We're going to call what needs to be called at the time, whether it's pass or run. They're going to do it. So, I mean, you have a true freshman right out of high school, and there's no restrictions on the play calling. They have the ultimate security blanket on this team because their running back, Eno Benjamin, one of the best, if not the best running back in the Pac-12, and certainly a guy that they could turn around with a freshman quarterback and just hand him the ball every time against Kent State. But it's not going to be the case here. It's a run-first philosophy, traditional pro style under Herm Edwards. But boy, I mean, Rob Likens is going to mix it up here. He doesn't mind taking shots with this kid. For Kent State, the other side of the equation here, they're in their second season under Sean Lewis, who brought the extreme tempo spread of Dino Babers here to Kent State. They want to run a play every 13 seconds. That's the goal for this team, so you can expect speed. Now, the question would be, Drew, does that help them in 90-degree heat in Tempe, Arizona, or does it hurt their depth? Do they start to wilt by the time the late third quarter, fourth quarter comes, especially on the defensive side of the football, when your offensive series, even if they result in scores, don't take very long? It's not a deep team. It's not bad through the first unit, but it's not a deep team, so maybe the heat takes its toll on Kent State. Woody Barrett, the quarterback, of course, transfer from Auburn, had a pretty good year last year, expected to be even better this year, second year in the system, gets 5 of his top 6 receivers back for this season. So they're going to throw it around a little bit, and they're going to test ASU, and they're probably going to try and wear out ASU's defensive front with these quick throws, make them pass rush, make them pass rush, make them pass rush until their tongues are hanging a little bit. But Arizona State's deeper. Arizona State's more accustomed to that heat. So I don't know if Kent State can get this done. Their defensive line's certainly going to be tested here. Like I say, Benjamin at running back. This is a team in Kent State. They gave up 220 rushing yards a game last year. They don't sack the quarterback, only 24 quarterback sacks last year. They'll have to do an awful lot of improving in those areas to stop ASU. My first inclination was, Arizona State's just going to take the ball and grind out this game and win it, and maybe 25 is worth taking. But after seeing the way Likens, the offensive coordinator, is going to play this one, I could change my mind certainly on this game. I could see advantages for both sides here where scoring is concerned. Kent State going to have to deal with Arizona State's 3-3-5 defense. That's another thing to be considered here. 3-3-5 not easy to learn, and Arizona State is in the second year now, so they should be a bit better. And game bumped from 58.5 to 60.5, or I see some 60s out there. I don't know. I could see it maybe getting over, but it'll be interesting to see if Barrett and that offense can do enough damage. If they can, they might be able to stay within 25. We'll see.
And you bring up Benjamin. He's like the short, bruising running back that's real quick for Arizona State, right?
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Yeah, that guy was fun to watch last year. And you bring up Woody Barrett, and I watched a bunch of his games. He transferred from Auburn. He showed flashes of being good, Robbie, but he's just not accurate. And if you're not accurate, that's not really a quarterback I'm looking to bet on. So what's your view of that? Do quarterbacks usually improve on their accuracy over one offseason, or no? If you're not accurate, you're not accurate? Yeah,
you know what? I don't think we can blanket statement it anymore, Drew, because we've seen examples of both in recent years where guys improve. I mean, I just brought up Kellen Mond. I think Kellen Mond probably killed more worms than he completed passes the first year I watched him. But now all of a sudden he's on target with stuff. So I think with the right quarterback coach and maybe getting into a system that you're better at, this Kent State system, at least what I perceive happening here is a lot of screens, a lot of quick slants, a lot of that type of stuff to tire the Arizona State defensive line out. Maybe Barrett can complete those. His running ability certainly is a help to keeping the front seven kind of on their heels a little bit. But I don't know. You can't blanket statement that part of the game anymore. Is an inaccurate guy just going to remain inaccurate? I agree with you, though. For the most part, Woody Barrett is like, just taking a shotgun and rotating it from left to right. It's all over the place. So we'll see if he can improve a little bit here. ASU's defense, like I say, that formation, not the easiest to attack, but they've had all summer to get ready for it. So, again, a lot of conflicting arguments both ways as we've had in a lot of these games, and that's what makes this week one so interesting.
And guys, we got one game left on Thursday night slate, and we'll be back talking Friday night and Saturday's game at a quicker pace as well. We're going a little long here, and that's my fault as well. But so we'll be. You guys get the gist if you're listening for the first time. The Sportsmemo podcast, the college football every game on the board podcast. Also want to throw out the coupon code here, SM half, for half off of the 7-day all access with Robbie Veno or myself, Drew Martin. Also half off full season packages. Got $500 worth of savings there. SM half at checkout for the coupon code at sportsmemo.com. Robbie, possibly the marquee game of Thursday night. We got the Utah Utes at the BYU team. 47 the total. Looks like -5, -5.5. The Utes laying on the road here versus the Cougars. How would you look to bet Utah versus BYU?
Yeah, boy, the early money's come with BYU, right? 7 down to 5, even a 4.5 we see out there, Drew. Brigham Young, the high point for me on this team is the quarterback play here. I think we're going to get an extremely good season worth of quarterback play out of BYU, which they haven't had in a while. I mean, since they fired Ty Detmer, right? And they were in that god-awful West Coast offense and couldn't get anything done, but they changed offensive coordinators a couple years back, and now I think it's the time where it starts to pay some dividends for this team. Second year in Jeff Grimes' system, but Zach Wilson, the sophomore quarterback, really impressive kid. So we'll see if BYU's offense doesn't remind us of what it was for a lot of years, 30 years, before it really went sour. It's a tough defense to do it against. Utah, I remember last year, Kyle Whittingham, before the season started, saying, when my team gets off the bus now, it looks like a Pac-12 team. And now they're a year better, a year more experienced, a year bigger, stronger, whatever. They've got great skill position players. This is a tough team. Most people picked this team to win the Pac-12 this year. So that's and they almost got there last year against Washington. I think a Washington interception for touchdown was the only touchdown in that game. So Utah is very difficult. The heated rivalry here makes it an even trickier handicap because you're going to get so much emotion from both teams. But to me, it's a statement game here for Kalani Sitake, the fourth-year head coach of BYU, who really hasn't done much, accomplished much heading into this year. I think this is a make or break season for him. They come off a huge bowl win that propels them into. So I expect a monster effort there. I just think Utah, man for man, is the better team, and maybe that wins out in the long run. A very, very difficult game to choose from. My power ratings made this game Utah -5, just to show you. I can't even find a power rating edge in this contest. Two really good defenses. I think the key will be Zach Wilson and whether or not BYU can get the ball down the field passing-wise this season. If they can, and I believe they'll be able to be for the majority of this season, then they're going to be a really good squad. Utah's just a really, really difficult defense to do it against here, Drew.
All right, Robbie, great stuff. As always, follow him on Twitter at RobVenoSports, and check out his packages at sportsmemo.com. The 7-day, the full season you can get for half off using the coupon code SMHalf. Guys, we won't be back tomorrow. I'm flying out to Vegas, staying there for football season. So taking tomorrow off. We'll be back on Wednesday breaking down the Friday night slate of college football games. So stay tuned to sportsmemo.com. Podcast will be back on Wednesday. Guys, best of luck with your bets. We'll talk then.